Hello and welcome to another episode of You, Me, and Ennui. Today we're going to be talking about finding your passion and how that applies to your work life. We're really excited to have another guest with us, Catherine Rains, and I can tell you a little bit about her. For the past 30 years, Catherine Rains has created collages for the purpose of inspiring herself and others to awaken to who we are meant to be. However, until age 33, she didn't think she had an artistic bone in her body and had never taken an art class. Catherine's artistic calling started as she followed what made her feel the most alive and connected. Beginning as a hobby, collage quickly evolved into her greatest joy and eventually her life's calling. After spending most of her adult life as a corporate trainer, she realized her dream of creating art full time in 2018, which has now evolved into teaching artists around the world to create collages that inspire and speak truth to the world. Welcome, Catherine. It's so good to have you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. I appreciate that.
We're really excited to speak with you today. The topic of work and finding your passion and where those two overlap, or maybe where they don't, is something that really interests us. So we're really excited to have you here to speak to us about it. But first, could you take a step back and tell us a little bit, beyond the bio that I just read? Can you tell us a little bit about your career journey?
Yeah, it's been quite a windy road. When I started off, at getting out of college, I had no idea. In fact, I had no inkling that I would ever end up as a full-time artist, actually making an income this way. I always thought I'd have a corporate job or I'd be running a career center for a university. Those are my two ambitions. And they were good ambitions, and I had prepared my entire life for them. I had gotten a master's for this, and I had moved states, moved physically to get different jobs to move up the ladder. But the higher I got, the more I realized there wasn't a fit, even though I was talented at it. So I
Mm,
was getting rewarded for good work, but I wasn't thriving. I was stressed all the time, wondering how I was going to basically motivate people to be the best they can be, which is kind of in my MO. I always
mhm,
want to support and motivate people to kind of step into who they are meant to be, but I wasn't doing it myself.
mm,
I was following what was logical to do. I had done all the career tests. I was a career counselor myself, so I knew how to find a path. And on paper, it looked like I had it. But in my soul, in my heart, it didn't match, what gave me joy. And so really the turning point was when I was kind of at my wit's end. I was so stressed. I had no idea how I was going to like what was my next step because I had prepared my entire life for this one thing. And at the time, that one thing was to be a major career development director at a large university. They're great jobs, they're lifetime contracts, you get great everything.
mhm,
Um, and I didn't like, what else was I going to do? I had prepared my whole life for that. And I was in it, I was embedded into it. So it all kind of started when I said, okay, you don't like your job and you can't go anywhere else because I have no idea where to go. So I did career development on myself. And a classic career development exercise that I've done for years is write a list of everything you love to do as a child, but weren't told to do it. So I made
mm,
this outrageously long list when I was 33, and it had things like kick the can, and I love to play Barbies, and I love to make forts and teach my sister's school. And in the middle of this long list was the word collage. And I had never done art. I had never drawn anything, painted anything. I considered myself an artistic nerd, but I had a memory of myself as a 10-year-old where I made one collage. And my parents took pictures of me holding my collage. In fact, it's on my studio wall right here because it's like the picture, that changed my life. And I said, you know what? Who can't tear up paper? I mean, I
mm,
can tear up paper like anybody else. So one Sunday, I got all my catalogs from the house. I tore them all up and made a collage. They were horrible, but I didn't know that. I thought it was the best, and it was at the time. It was the best I knew how to make. But the point is that my heart exploded. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is how I want to feel. And so it started off as stress relief. I just followed the cues. And I really have done that from that day forward. It took a very, very long time from age 33, I am now 64, to actually finding a way to keep that alive, keep that, oh my God, I love this. But it's following little tiny cues all the way along, like what gives you joy. And I believe many times it happens by following the day-to-day things that just give you joy.
Hmm.
Like, I like tearing up paper and making very juvenile looking things. By the way, people thought I had children. They were so juvenile, which
Oh no.
which didn't bother me a hoot. I don't know why it didn't bother me. Because to me, each one of these collages were my soul. And
Mm.
I loved them like they were children. And so I wasn't insulted a bit, but it took a long time, you know, and that was perfectly fine. That was my path. That's the path I needed to take. I eventually moved on from being a university career director to becoming a corporate trainer for the Myers-Briggs company, the MBTI. And I did that for most of my adult life. And I loved it. But I always knew in the back of my brain that this wasn't it. Even though I actually loved my job, when I got into corporate training, I was fulfilling what I considered my purpose, which is to support people in finding their life's passion. But it was just the way I was doing it, you know, and I needed to do that for as long as I needed to do it. But ironically, doing that actually prepared me for this, which is now I
Mm.
train people all over the world, but I train them to find their art voice, to express themselves through art, which nothing is better than that for me right now.
I love that. Yeah, I love, reflecting back what you just said about how even though there was some sense that you had deep down that the path that you were taking in career counseling wasn't quote unquote right for you, there were still elements that like prepared you for the next step to take it. So I love hearing that. That sounds very it's just very providential. And I love the process that you took for yourself on reflecting back on when you felt the happiest or the most like yourself. Would you say that this is a good practical approach that other people can take to find their passion?
It's the path that I took, and then I've helped
Mhm.
probably thousands of people at this point do the exact same thing. And it's trusting that you already do know where to go, but you don't know the
Mhm.
end destination. Like I didn't, although I had this little dream in my head, like when I made my first collage, I went, wouldn't it be cool to have a career like this?
Yeah.
But it took another 20 years before that manifested. But I was doing it all along. I was always doing art. So the answer to your question is that by following the little cues that we already know, like the little thing that when you say to yourself, God, wouldn't that be cool? To me, that is the path. But some people get discouraged because they don't see how they're going to get there. Like they want to jump to that. I would have loved to have jumped to that. I would have loved to have gone straight to full-time art when I was 33, but that wasn't my path. There were so many skills I needed to learn by taking, a corporate job and following day by day. Okay, now what feels good? Oh, okay, now what feels good? Oh, okay, now what feels good? Constantly readjusting. And for me, it was also it was a matter of I never knew I was going to get there, to it. And I had to be happy wherever I was.
Mm.
So even when there were, I was traveling every single week on the road, 5 days a week. And even when that was stressful physically, I had to keep saying, but this is where I'm meant to be now. And I'm not going to fight
Mm.
this. I'm not going to try to get out of this. Instead, I'm going to fully be in this because to me, being fully in where you are it gets you where you want to go. It's when you fight it, that's when you get stuck basically. You get entrenched
Mm.
and you don't see a way out because there is not a way out. The way out sounds corny, but the way out is in. It's fully in, even though you could be unhappy.
That's so interesting. That like is really resonating with me in a way that I hadn't expected. I've had many conversations with like friends and family members. I've changed jobs and careers really a few times, and there's always been this feeling that I've had as well. What you said about, you have to choose to be happy wherever you are for right now. And so, some of my friends would say, well, I used to work in a corporate job. I worked in corporate marketing and advertising before that. And now I work in the nonprofit world where I get to talk about spirituality and what that means to young people.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how I was going to get there. But yes, originally when I was in my corporate secular role, I would have friends say, well, like, why don't you just make a change like right now? And I'm like, I don't know what it is yet. So I just have to focus on
Yeah.
doing what I'm doing right now and where I am really well. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting to hear that reflected from someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting when I first kind of came to where this realization, it actually was in my young 30s when I was in the university job. And at that point, I had spent 6.5 years. So I'd already found my art. Of
Hmm.
course, I was long. I mean, it was years before I was going to make a living this way, but I had found my art. Now I was 6.5 years into this job. And I have to tell you, for 6.5 years, I was miserable. No one knew it, but because I was projecting competence and I'm a very positive person. So people saw me that way. But underneath it was like, God, what am I doing here? I hate managing people. I hate being yelled at all the time because that's what was happening. It was I was serving lots of audiences. But at the 6.5 year mark, something dawned on me from a spiritual perspective because I believe in the concept of what you resist persists. I believe it strongly. And so I was miserable this one day, and this voice came into my head that says, what you resist persists. You are going to stay here the rest of your life if you keep fighting where you are. So instead of like, that lizard brain you have that goes, I don't want to be here. What are we doing here? I don't want to get out of here. So, my brain was like this for 6.5 years. And finally, I just like, in a moment, I went, oh, I'm resisting it. Even though it was logical, 100% logical to resist things, people are yelling at you, and it was just, it was a stressful environment. It's like, why wouldn't you resist that? But as soon as I realized that's what I was doing, all of a sudden, every time somebody came at me, and wanted me to solve a big problem, or they were taking up my time and I didn't have time for them. My boss wanted my energy and I didn't want to give him my energy. I went, oh, I'm supposed to be here.
Hmm.
And when I realized, oh, this is it, I'm supposed to serve here because there really wasn't a path out. I live in a small southern town. That's where the university was. There were no other jobs unless I was going to, completely uproot everything, which I wasn't prepared to do at the time. But as soon as I started doing that and stopped fighting where I was, I swear to God, the entire universe opened up. And within
Hmm.
3 months, that's when the Myers-Briggs company called me and offered me pretty much the dream job. And I moved, and it was the perfect job. Even though I would have loved to have been an artist right then and there, it wasn't
Hmm.
what I was supposed to be doing. And this has happened multiple times in my life. Every time I fight, I fight. No, I don't want to be here. This is not the right. And it can be anything. I've gone through
Hmm.
cancer, I've gone through divorce, major upheavals in my life, all things that